What's going on there, YouTube? Welcome back to another comic book video. Okay, so we're going to really wrap up our coverage over the X-Tinction Agenda. And now we pick up with the last 3 chapters of this crossover. Now, before we actually dive into this crossover, I kind of want to do a quick rundown of why we have this 9-part crossover in X-Men comics. You see, a while back in an earlier story arc in Uncanny X-Men, you had the X-Men had a few members of their team become prisoners in Genosha. Now, when it came to Genosha, it was a small country in Africa, a small island near Africa, where they tried to paint this picture that they were the perfect country, that it was paradise there. If you go there, you do not want to leave at all. But in reality, if you were a mutant, you were a slave, and they used your abilities as a way to build up their economy. And that was the big thing about Genosha. Now, when it came to the X-Men, they were able to save a few of their team members who were prisoners in that country, but also save other prisoners as well. Not all of them, but a few of them. Now, that was a while back, but here's the thing though. You see, there was another character out there known as Cameron Hodge. Now, the last time we saw Cameron was back in X-Men Inferno, where you actually had Archangel be able to cut his head off. Now, when it came to Cameron, he made a deal with a demon, and that demon gave him immortality. So even though his head was cut off, his head just traveled across the world over to Genosha. Now, once it had arrived there, you then had Genosha give him a robotic body so that he'll have the ability to move around. Now, both parties came together and said, you know what? Let's get payback against the people who did us wrong. And so for Genosha, it was the X-Men. They're saying right now to the rest of the world that the X-Men had attacked them in that previous story arc, even though they had technically kidnapped the X-Men and tried to force the X-Men to be slaves in their country. And so this is Genosha saying, what we're doing right now is trying to get payback for what the X-Men have done to us. And for Cameron, he is down with the idea of hurting the mutant race, especially the X-Men, X-Factor, and New Mutants, because Cameron had a group known as the Right. And when it came to the Right, their main goal was to get rid of the mutant race. And so for Cameron, this goes right up his alley. One, to get rid of the X-Men, X-Factor, and New Mutants, but then after that, begin the process of going after other mutants around the world. Now, the first chapter that we are going to talk about is going to be Uncanny X-Men number 272. Now, in the opening pages of this chapter, we see our heroes right now being put on trial for crimes that they had supposedly committed against Genosha. Now, here's the thing. Most of our heroes who are here right now being put on trial were not there in the original story arc where you had the X-Men arrived in Genosha to save their own. Most of them are right now being put on trial because in the earlier parts of this crossover, they had attacked Genosha to get their friends back. Either way, they're all being put on trial for the crimes that they had committed. Now, here's the thing, our heroes right now are powerless as well, thanks to another mutant known as Wipeout, who, well, has the ability to wipe out your powers. Now, when it comes to our heroes, they get very upset when they see Storm walk into the room, because by this point, Storm and another character known as Wolverine, they have been turned into slaves. And so for Storm, she was assigned to protect the judge while the trial goes on. Now, when it comes to the judge and also Genosha, they're giving our heroes a choice. 2 choices. 1, become slaves and actually work for the government or work for our country, or 2, be killed off. Like, those are your 2 choices. If I was you guys, I would choose the option of being slaves, because at least you'll be alive. Now, when it comes to our heroes, we already know they are not going to choose the idea of becoming slaves for these evil people. Now, for Logan, he does get very upset when he sees Storm as a slave, because in the earlier parts of the X-Tinction Agenda, well, he came here with Psylocke hoping to save her and Wolfbane. But the problem was he failed. And so because he failed, he hates the idea of seeing her as a slave, and he tries to attack the judge. Now, without his healing factor, unfortunately, he can't do much when it comes to fighting against the magistrate to get to the judge. And so he is quickly taken down by a few guards and also Storm as well. But you have the judge say, you know what, to make sure there's not going to be another outburst, hand these guys over to Cameron Hodge, because they all decided to be killed off, because they said, no, we will not become slaves for you people. Now, by the time our heroes arrive over to Cameron Hodge, you didn't have Cable and Gambit try their best to take down Cameron, but to also free their fellow friends. But here's the problem. One, Gambit and Cable are powerless. But two, when it comes to Cameron and his new robotic body, it has so many different kinds of abilities that Cable and Gambit are unable to overcome all those different kinds of abilities. Like, for example, he is able to phase through solid objects. He has a healing factor, and the list goes on. And so for Cable and Gambit, they are once again recaptured and brought back with the rest of the group. Now, when it comes to Cameron, like I said earlier, when it comes to our heroes, they had decided to go ahead and die rather than be slaves for Genosha. But that's the problem though. For Cameron, he's now looking at our heroes as toys to play with. And so yes, they're going to die, but he is going to take his time. Now, before he's able to start, we have to remember that Havoc is also working for Genosha, but for a completely different reason. You see, when it came to the X-Men in an earlier story arc, they had to walk through something called the Siege Perilous, which had the ability to give the X-Men new lives across the world. Now, sometimes that new life can be great, and sometimes it could be horrible, but also sometimes you may remember everything from your past life, or you may forget everything from your past life. And so when it came to Havoc, when he walked through the Siege Perilous, he arrived here in Genosha, but not remembering anything from his past life. Now, by this point in our crossover, he does remember everything, but right now he is pretending that he has no idea that he was an X-Men, that he is the brother to Cyclops, because right now he is waiting for the right time to free his fellow teammates. Now, when it comes to Psylocke, she says, you know what? I changed my mind. I hate the idea of being tortured. I hate the idea of seeing my friends being tortured. I'd rather be a slave than be killed off. And so you have Cameron tell Havoc, okay, fine, take her over to David to have him change her into a slave, because she agreed to become one, and they leave. Now, after you have Havoc and Psylocke leave the room, you have Cameron say, you know what, it's now time for me to continue to play with my toys. And so he turns back over and grabs Archangel and Wolverine, because this man knows that these two characters do not like each other at all. And the reason why? Because of Jean Grey. You see, we already knew that Cyclops and Jean Grey were together. We already knew that Logan also liked Jean Grey, but so did Archangel since the 1960s. And really, anytime Jean Grey is single, that man tries his best to get with her, but always failed. And so in the 70s, when he found out that Logan had a crush on Jean Grey, oh man, the hatred was on. Really, also because when it came to Logan, he was very rude towards Archangel as well. But either way, you have Cameron being able to have the two characters fight against each other. Now, when it comes to Archangel, we have to remember that by this point, his wings, they have a mind of their own, actually. And so when it comes to Archangel, because right now he's technically powerless, he no longer has control of his wings. And so his wings begin to attack Wolverine. And for Logan, he has to protect himself. And so yes, you do have the two characters fighting against one another. Now, by this point in our coverage, we have to remember that Richter and Jubilee and also Boom Boom are no longer prisoners of Genosha. Really, Jubilee never was. And when it came to Richter and Boom Boom, they were able to escape earlier. And really, when it came to the rest of the heroes being captured, they realized they had no choice but to go ahead and back away. Because again, if they had stayed, they would also be prisoners as well. Now, when it comes to our younger heroes, they see David Moreau breaking into a different part of the Citadel. Now, remember, when it comes to David, he was the guy who had created the process that turned mutants into slaves. When someone turned 13 years old in Genosha, there's a test given to you to prove if you are a mutant or not. If that test proves that you are one, you become a slave. And so for our young heroes, they know that he is one of the main bad guys of this country. But where in the world is he going to right now when it comes to breaking into a different part of the Citadel? Now, when it comes to Cameron Hodge, he's getting very bored about the idea of watching Wolverine and Archangel go against each other. And so now he's going after a different character, which is going to be Wipeout. But while he's doing that, you have Psylocke on her way over to become a slave. Except we kind of find out that she had lied about the idea of wanting to become one, because now she's able to begin the process of a breakout to free herself, but also the rest of her team. Now, luckily for her, Havoc is technically back on their side, and so he is able to help her out. Now, when it comes to Cameron, he does arrive into the office of David Moreau, hoping to find David, but David's not there. We already know where he's at. He's trying to break into a different part of the Citadel. And so for Cameron, he says, fine, if David's not around, I'll just go ahead and hack into his computer. Now, when it comes to Cameron, he's able to find out that David has a plot to bring down Cameron Hodge. Now, we have to remember that in this entire crossover, it was well established that these two guys do not like each other at all, especially David. He hated Cameron and everything he standed for. Now, when it comes to Wipeout, he walks into the room. And so you have Cameron turn around and he killed off Wipeout for a completely different reason. Now, we jump back over to our heroes who are still prisoners. Now, when it comes to Cyclops, he realized that one of the abilities that Cameron Hodge has is to be able to throw these spikes out of his body. And one of those spikes hit Gambit. And so you have Gambit being able to use the spikes as a way to be a lockpick, to break open the locks. And so now our heroes are free again. Now for Cyclops, he does tell everyone that he realized that Psylocke has a plan. But the question is, what is that plan? Now, when it comes to Havoc, when he arrives into the office of David Moreau, he finds Wipeout. And this is the reason why Cameron Hodge had killed off Wipeout, to make it seem like Havoc was the killer. Because Wolfbane appears and she says, guys, listen, it was him. It was Havoc. He's the one who had killed off Wipeout, because Havoc still pretends that he's part of their group, part of their organization. And so the other guards in the building are like, oh, well, she says she saw you with the dead body, and kind of seems like you did use your abilities to kill him off. The way his body is right now, he does seem a tad bit roasted. So Havoc, we kind of do believe that you are the killer. Now, there is a character I do want to talk about, and that would be Tam Anderson. Now, when it comes to Tam, she's actually the sheriff of the entire magistrate organization. And so because of that, she's in charge of a lot of different soldiers. But when it comes to Tam, she is no longer trying to help Genosha out. She is no longer trying to help out the president, nor trying to help out Cameron Hodge. this is her right now really committing treason and trying to bring him down and anybody else who's on his side, because she realized that that man Cameron is completely insane. And so we see her trying to transport Storm somewhere else, but unfortunately she is caught by Cameron, who now knows that she is trying to commit treason. Now luckily for Tam, you have Psylocke appear, and Psylocke is able to grab Storm and also Tam to get the heck out of there. But getting back over to our heroes who are still prisoners, we see them right now trying to break out of their binds. But then you have Tam and Storm walk into the room. Now when they do, at first, it's our heroes believing that Tam is a bad guy still, that Tam is working with Cameron Hodge. But then you have Tam tell Storm, bring Cyclops over to you. Now at first, our heroes still believe that Storm is just being a slave following orders, but in reality, she's not, because Storm is no longer under anybody's control. You see, when it came to David, this man had a plan in motion to bring down Cameron Hodge, and he knew that Storm had to be part of that plan. And so you have Storm reveal that technically she's no longer under anyone's control at all, but also she has the ability to restore other people's powers. And so you have Storm give Cyclops a light shock, and just like that, this man had just regained his optic beam, and luckily just in time, because Cameron Hodge just barged right into the room, and Cyclops releases a huge blast hoping to do some damage on Cameron. Now the next chapter we have to talk about is New Mutants number 97. Now in the opening pages of this chapter, we actually see Cyclops trying his best to use his optic beam to bring down Cameron Hodge. But here's the problem. Cameron Hodge's new robotic body is just too strong to bring down so easily. And so he is able to actually eat the blast that Cyclops is constantly throwing at him like it's nothing. Now, when it comes to Cyclops, he's trying to do this to give Storm enough time to reactivate the other heroes' powers so that they can all work together to bring down Cameron Hodge. But the problem is, Cameron is not giving them enough time to actually pull it off. But luckily for our heroes, a bomb goes off. Now, when it comes to Cyclops, in our last video, we had talked about the idea that him and Forge had a plan going on that only they knew about. The rest of the team had no idea about this plan, and that plan was a secret bomb. And you see, when it came to Forge, he was knocked out in our last video because he knew that if he got captured, when it comes to Genosha, they would try to read his mind, and if they did, they would find the bomb. And so he basically made sure that he was unconscious to make sure they couldn't read his mind. And so now that bomb has gone off, and that bomb did enough damage to bring down part of the building onto Cameron Hodge. Now he is not dead, but it does give our heroes enough time to kind of get away and to regroup. Now I want to jump back over to Richter, Boom Boom, and Jubilee, because remember, they were following David. They were not with the rest of our heroes, but they realized that David was trying to dig a hole into the Citadel, and we kind of find out that he was trying to find the secret lair that belonged to Cameron Hodge. But here's the problem though. You see, when it came to David, he used one of his mutant slaves to help dig into the lair, except when they got into the lair, Forge bomb went off, and so part of the explosion killed off the mutant but knocked out David. Now when it comes to our heroes, they grabbed David and went into the lair, and they realized it belonged to Cameron Hodge. Now the only reason why they knew it belonged to Cameron is because he walked into the room, and he realized that when it came to Forge bomb, they were trying to bring down the computer that's connected to Cameron's mind. But luckily for Cameron, the computer was not completely destroyed, and he leaves his lair. Now when it comes to Richter, he wakes up David and says, you are going to take me over to Wipeout to give me the chance to get my abilities back, because it's time for me to bring down the entire building. Now, getting back over to our heroes who were prisoners, you do have them go over to Forge, and you have Cyclops being able to say a phrase to actually wake him up. Now, once you have Forge get back up and realize that Storm is okay, you have those two characters make out. Now, when it comes to Cyclops, they got a lot of work to do. First, they gotta find Rain Sinclair, Wolfbane, the other mutant that was turned into a slave. But also, they got to find Cameron Hodge and bring him down. And so our heroes are once again going to split up. Now, when it comes to Wolverine, he does have one concern, and that is Havoc, because none of them know that Havoc is actually good again. They still believe that he is a bad guy. But you have Cyclops say, hey, if you see him, just work with him. Try to help him to realize that he is a good person. And again, they have no idea that he already knows about his past life. Now, I want to jump over to Richter, Boom Boom, and Jubilee because they're with David, and really, they were able to find Wolfbane, but the problem is Wolfbane was listening to her last command by Cameron Hodge, and so she goes out of her way to attack Richter. Now, let's not forget that Richter and Rain Sinclair, they were actually in love with one another, and so to see her like this, he freaks out. Now, luckily for Richter, David was there to give her a command to stop, but they realize that she is in full-on slave mode now to Genosha and David. Now, when it comes to Richter, he's very upset, and the reason why? Well, yes, Wolfbane, but also because our heroes find the dead body of Wipeout. And like I said earlier, when it comes to Wipeout, he has the ability to wipe away your powers, but he also has the ability to give your powers back. But with them being dead, our young heroes believe that they no longer have the chance to get their powers back. But luckily for them, Cable and Storm arrive, and you have Storm begin the process to return their abilities. Now, when it comes to Storm, she does have the ability to give Richter and Boom Boom their abilities back. But when it comes to Wolfbane, there is a small problem. Let me explain. So when it comes to the process to turning someone into a slave for Genosha, like I said, you are getting brainwashed to the point where the only thing you believe is that you have to serve the people of Genosha and use your abilities to help their country out. That is it. And the problem is there's no way to reverse that. And so when it comes to Wolfbane, it does seem like she will always be a slave. But here's the catch. When she's in her regular wolf form, she actually has the ability to think for herself and not be a slave. But that's the problem though. She has to stay in her wolf form. If she tries to turn back into a regular human, unfortunately, she cannot think for herself. She'll have the mind of a slave in Genosha. Now, when it comes to Wolfbane, she is down with the idea of getting revenge against Cameron Hodge for what he has done to her and her friends. Now, when it comes to one of the teams that Cyclops had put together, while they were just walking around, they had no idea that they were being watched by Cameron Hodge. Now, when it comes to this team, you have Iceman, Psylocke, Beast, Gambit, Banshee, and Forge. Now you have a pretty decent team here, and you would think, okay, they should be able to bring down Cameron Hodge. No, that is completely wrong. As soon as this guy fades into the room they're on, he takes them out left and right. It gets to the point where it really comes down to Forge and also Beast to try their best to bring him down. Now, luckily for this team, you have Cameron Hodge leave them alone. And the reason why, because back in his secret lair, Cable's team is getting rid of a computer that is heavily connected to Cameron Hodge. And he needs that computer really bad. And so while taking down Beast's team, he realized that his computer is being damaged. And so he leaves them alone to go deal with Cable's team. Now, when he does arrive, Cable's team is also struggling to bring down Cameron Hodge. But luckily for our heroes, when it comes to David, he does have a weapon that does some serious damage to Cameron's body. But here's the problem though. Cameron kills off David just like that, and then he disappears. Now, for our heroes, they are very upset about the idea that they weren't able to bring down Cameron Hodge. Now, something else I should also mention is that earlier in this story arc, they found what could be ashes of Warlock, what's left of him. Because remember, he died in the earlier parts of this crossover. So when they find his ashes in some kind of container, they said, listen, we have to take this back and spread these ashes on the grave of Doug Ramsey, aka Cypher, because Cypher and Warlock were like best friends. But you have most of Cable's team continue on to hopefully find Cameron Hodge and to bring him down. Now, when it comes to the final chapter, it does take place in X Factor number 62. Now, most of the pages early on this chapter is really more just Cable's team trying to fight against Cameron Hodge once again. But that's the problem though. Cameron Hodge is just way too strong for our heroes. Now, when it comes to Wolfbane, she does not care at all. Her main goal right now is to just get revenge. Even if she has no game plan on how to bring down Cameron Hodge, she does not care because she now has a chance to actually kill off the man who did so much harm to her, but the people she loves as well. Now, when it comes to Cable, he knows that his team is losing. So he says, hey, I need to call in backup right now. And so they call in for Cyclops. Now, I want to jump over to Cyclops because you do have Cyclops telling Archangel to hurry up and go help out Cable's team. But you also have Cyclops telling Jean Grey that he wants her to stay back, like as a way to protect her. Now, he does tell her, hey, listen, I feel like your powers cannot really help us when it comes to battling against Cameron Hodge, but at the same time, I'm trying to protect you. Now, when it comes to Logan, he does get very upset in the fact that it seems like Cyclops is trying to boss her around. And so you have the two characters kind of go back and forth until you have Jean Grey step in and say, listen, Cyclops, I can do what I want to do. And Logan, I don't need you to speak up for me. And then you have both guys just stand there like, man, what a great woman. And then they go on to go help out to battle against Cameron Hodge. Now, I want to say that I'm going to skip over a few pages when it comes to the final chapter of this event because, yes, there is a lot of battles happening in this final chapter. And yes, they're all so great, but I really want to go ahead and focus on the ending of this chapter, the ending of this event, so that we can go ahead and wrap it up. So we do pick up with Cyclops and Havoc being the last two men standing while the rest of the heroes are able to get out of the building. Now, when it comes to Cyclops and Havoc, they let Cameron Hodge have everything. They release all the energy they have inside their body for one big heck of an attack on Cameron Hodge. And really, it's not just one attack. They keep doing it over and over and over again, just breaking away his body piece by piece. But the problem is he does have a healing factor. And on top of that, we cannot forget that he did make a deal with a demon. And so because of that deal, this man truly cannot die. Now you do have Cameron, Cyclops, and also Havoc fall off the top of the building, but Cyclops and Havoc are caught by Jean Grey. Now, when it comes to Cameron, even though he's just ahead, he's still alive because the deal he made with that demon. And he truly believes that his new body can re-heal itself back to what it was in the earlier parts of this event. And so even though he's just ahead, he believes that he should be able to just bounce right back until you have Wolfbane being able to tell Richter, bring down the entire building. Because remember, when it comes to Richter, he has the ability to create seismic waves. And so by doing that, he was able to bring down the entire Citadel right on top of Cameron Hodge. Now, we already know that he's not dead, but it will take him a very long time to come back and be a problem for our heroes again down the road. Now, the last 2 pages of this book, it really does wrap everything up for us. Now, yes, you do have our heroes go their separate ways, but when it comes to Anderson, the person in charge of the magistrate, she does tell the other countries around the world that the military has now officially taken over the island, that the government has been overthrown. And so right now they're in charge, and their main goal is to make this country a better place, not just for humans, but also mutants as well. Now, when it comes to Wolfbane, she does not leave with the New Mutants. She stays here to help out, to begin the process of trying to fix this place back up. Now, for Richter, he is heartbroken because now the woman he loves is not going to go back with him home. And so he is sad, but she does ascertain to do one last thing before they leave. She says, "Can you please spread the ashes of Warlock on top of Doug's grave?" Because Cypher, who died back in Fall of the Mutants, they were close friends. And I think Doug will love the idea of Warlock ashes being on top of his grave. And really, you have the New Mutants do that. Now, I kind of want to sit down and quickly explain what was Cameron Hodge's master plan when it came to Genosha. You see, what he was going to do was take over the entire island and turn it into some kind of mega base that would then allow him to hunt down other mutants around the world. Because again, when it came to Cameron Hodge, his whole idea was to get rid of the mutant race. And so he wanted to take over Genosha and turn it into a military island, technically, to go out there to find other mutants and kill them, or possibly turn them into slaves. But this is where we are going to end today's comic book video. So please leave me a like down below and subscribe. But guys, see y'all next time. Later.